Hey everyone, I'm Jason Citron, founding craftsman at Hammer Chisel, and we make core games for gamers on tablets. So today I'm here to unveil a game called Fates Forever. And Fates Forever is a multiplayer online battle arena, or a MOBA, designed exclusively for tablets. In a MOBA, you play on teams of 3 in real-time combat with the objective of destroying your opponent's base. So let me show you. All right. So, where does the story begin? A long time ago, when I was a kid, I always wanted to have a game studio. And I grew up, like most of us, and I did. I launched a game called Aurora Faint on the iPhone the day that the App Store opened, and it did okay, but it allowed me to build a different company, which was called OpenFaint, which was a mobile social gaming network for iOS and Android, and that was a smashing success. I built that to 120 million players, 7,000 games, and 100 employees as CEO. And then we sold it for a lot of money, which was pretty cool. But it was a fantastic learning experience. And unfortunately, I still hadn't yet built that gaming company that I really wanted to make when I was a kid. So I thought I should try again, right? So enter Hammer Chisel. So now when I think about building a games company, I think about starting with the hardest problem, which is getting users. And when I think about getting users, I think about platforms, big platforms that have large companies spending billions of dollars to drive adoption, and then, but aren't fulfilling the needs of a particular segment that I'm interested in building something for, in this case, core gamers. So I looked around, and tablets seemed like they would disrupt PCs and consoles for time spent playing core games. And it turns out that just last quarter, more tablets were shipped than PCs worldwide, which is pretty incredible. So the thing with tablets is that they also enable long-form gaming, right? The stereotype is that Kenny walks into the computer lab and sits down to play World of Warcraft for like 100 hours and never gets up. With a tablet, you can do this, right? Because you're at home. You have a stable internet connection. You're not getting phone calls from your parents or whatever. But what's weird about it is that there are no original long-form games designed exclusively for this usage mode on tablets, right? You have great games like The Room and Plants vs. Zombies, but nothing that's like a hobby that you can play for hundreds of hours and get lost in. So tablets seemed like a good place. But what do we build? As a startup, we could invent something, right? You could just say, let's make some crazy game. But as a startup, I thought that going into an unbounded R&D cycle would not be smart, right? We don't have infinite money. So we made an observation that most great games are reinterpretations of existing games, but for new user interfaces. So Nintendo is a fantastic example of this. 30 years ago, they made a game called Donkey Kong where you jump over things. And then they put it on a TV, added some more buttons. It's still fundamentally the same mechanic where you jump over things, and it's awesome. They did it again. They added an analog stick, and they called it Mario 64, and it's awesome. And they keep doing this. So I thought that the MOBA genre would be a great fit to do something like this, too. So the thing with MOBA is 100 million gamers play this. I have spent so many weekends of my life just locked in a dark room playing this game. And bringing it to a tablet is a fantastic opportunity to redo how you use the inputs. So there's a mechanic called skill shots in the game where you kind of aim with the mouse to do something. On the tablets, we said, obviously no mouse. Instead, we're going to use gestures. So one example is draw gesture. So this is a character where his name is Dim, and he's a wizard. And you place your finger on him, and you draw a little line, and these little blue dots fall behind your finger. And when you pick it up, he'll shoot a fireball that follows the path. So you can draw a squiggle, a circle, a line, whatever suits the moment. We have another one, which is a flick gesture. you press your finger on him and you pull out this little rubber band you can see there and you let go and then he dashes in a direction and the screen shakes and it's really cool. So we have a bunch of these things. And it turns out that people like it. In our early alpha tests, we have many players who've spent more than 40 hours, which is kind of shocking because we really don't have a lot of content yet. So the thing with gaming companies, right, is how do you be more than a gaming company? You've built a game, let's say it's a hit, what happens next? Now, an observation that I've made is that most great media companies all follow similar patterns, right? They start by building fantastic content, and then they usually leverage or build a community around that content, and then leverage it into some kind of unfair distribution platform, right? Disney's a fantastic example of this, where they started making movies, and then now with Disney Channel and all this stuff. There's another fantastic analogy, which is a company called Valve. They make a platform on the PC called Steam, where people can download independent games. So I could imagine, given my experience at OpenFaint, that Fates Forever starts out as a game, we build a community of rabid fans, and then from there, we leverage that to build tools and things around it to reduce future risk. So the game is Fates Forever. The company is Hammer Chisel. It will be available on iPad later this year, Android tablet shortly after. You can visit the website, fatesforever.com, to sign up. Thank you.
Right. Great job. Judges?
Hey, well, I mean, it looks cool and like a fun game.
Right.
And you sold your last company for $100 million, so you don't need VC money, or so.
Well, I mean, I didn't get all that money.
Okay.
I mean, that's how that works.
No, I mean, I think you identified the key challenge of, I think from our perspective of games, which is that the successful ones tend to be hit-driven, and it's hard to replicate.
Right, right.
So I'd love to hear more about your plans
Yeah, sure.
to sort of
So-
bring it to distribution.
One of the things that we're doing that's very different than typical, big budget games, right? We've raised $2.5 million already to build this product. And one of the things that we're doing very differently than these kind of typical projects is we're taking a very kind of metrics-driven approach, which you guys are all familiar with. And it got really big on free-to-play games on Facebook and mobile, which I watched a lot from OpenFaint. And we're bringing that knowledge of how do you instrument and build a product to building a game, right? So we've been live in some test markets for a couple months, and when we launched the game, the metrics were like, oh, okay. So people who get through play it a lot, but not a lot of people got through the funnel. So we've spent a few weeks iterating and improving, and now our bounce and day 2 retention rate numbers are like multiples of what they were when we started. So we're just kind of going down the list of improving each of those steps, from the ad you see to the App Store page to all the things in the middle, to hopefully people stick around and share with their friends. It's inherently a 3 versus 3 real-time multiplayer game. You cannot play against the computer, so it's viral. And did that answer your question?
Yeah, but then you talked about stage 2, where you become a distribution platform.
Yeah. So that was sort of bookended at the end, because right now we're very much focused on building a fantastic piece of content, which is where I think something will come from, right? So stage 2 of the company, though, looks probably like a set of tools or features that we can use to take advantage of the community of players that we've grown around our first piece of content. So those tools could be something like social network stuff, kind of OpenFainty things, but perhaps different.
That's hard on iOS and Android right now, right? Because they control so much of it.
Well, sure. That's why we're not building it yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know a lot about games, but I've been really fascinated over the years with Nintendo. And I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that there's an amazing guru there that's come up with a lot of their great ideas.
Yeah.
And his philosophy is that it's not enough to just constantly make the graphics cards better. It's not enough to just do a better version of what already existed. To make it fun and to make the game fun, you've got to do things that are different. Like the Wii, like jumping over things as opposed to just shooting things, right? That you need that kind of differentiation twist, or said less politely, you need a gimmick of some kind. So what are the differentiators? Do you think that the gesture-based skill shots and things like that are going to be enough to make the game fun?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. One of the things that I learned from observing Nintendo through my entire life is that the way that they build games is they constantly change the user interface, right? And that's how I made that observation that I talked about before, which is they have a fundamental thing that you do, which is fun, right? And fun is very much a reflection of, I think, the way that our brains are wired, right? Because it's just like stimulating to the particular way the neurons are mapped in your head or whatever. And so they figure out these mechanics, things that are interesting to you as innately as a human being, and then they change the way that you engage with that fundamental thing over and over again. And what we've done is we've taken a game that is incredibly popular, a genre that's incredibly popular on a PC, and we've reinterpreted it for a large touchscreen. So it's fundamentally a mechanic that people already go insane over, myself included. And we've just changed the way that you engage with it. And an interesting side effect of this is that I think because tablets have the potential to reach a much broader audience than PCs or even TV gaming, especially when you consider like the third world countries over the next 10 years, I think that there's an opportunity here to really build like the next generation of Nintendo or Activision, starting with a fantastic piece of content here and then building it into some kind of platform, maybe for community, maybe for distribution, whatever that might be, that reaches way beyond what the current games industry does. Does that make sense?
So you mentioned that OpenFaint wasn't the company, the game studio you really wanted to build. What are the top 1 or 2 takeaways from that experience that you're going to apply to this?
Wow, that's a good question. Trying to think of the top 2. I'll just rattle some stuff, right? So specifically starting with the hardest problem of getting users, right? So many times in my experience at OpenFaint, I would be approached by people at conferences who would have a game and they're like, dude, check out my game. And they'd show it to me and they'd be like, how come no one's downloading my game? And I was just like, it's not awesome. Like, you need to just make it awesome. So like that was one thing that I noticed just from watching the entire mobile gaming industry start, is that so many people are getting caught up in like advertising and all these different things as like almost like growth hacks, if you want to call it that, because they're really hacks. You don't have a good product. That's why you have to do all this junk. You know, great games have zero marketing budget. So, you know, can we build one?
Any other judges?
Have you run into any challenges with Wi-Fi? Because when I've met with people who work on multiplayer games for iPads and for phones, there's an issue with the latency introduced by Wi-Fi. So if you're going to constrain it to be a multiplayer game solely, you've not run into that issue?
No, we've not. The game runs brilliantly on Wi-Fi. You know, people sit at home in their living rooms on PC and play these games all day.
But then they have a wired connection. At least the way it was explained to me was the introduction of the wireless hop for tablets was going to make it harder to do real-time multiplayer games on tablets. But if you've not run into it, then
no, we certainly do not see any latency issues. I mean, the things that we're doing are not. I mean, it's low latency, but it's not like, you know,
not like a racing game or something like that.
No. I mean, just generally speaking, the way you would design and build a video game, the latency requirements. You know, if you have a cable internet, broadband, I don't have the specific numbers, which I think is maybe what you're getting at, but we haven't had any issues with Wi-Fi latency. On 3G, we have issues. So the game does not work on 3G that well, so we just don't even go there. It'll run on LTE fine, because LTE has much better latency than 3G did, but we've never had a single person be like on a good Wi-Fi connection and have any issues with it.
And so one of the observations I've had is that tablets, at least for the last year or so, are an older demographic. So sort of the sweet spot user of a tablet is probably 35, 40, not 20, 25. And I think if your product is being aimed at that demographic, I presume this is the sort of thing that can change very quickly, especially with Android tablets sort of gaining steam very quickly. Are you worried about market timing? You know, do you feel the universe of people in the right age demographic have tablets?
I mean, market timing is something that's always a concern for an entrepreneur, right? Because we get one shot, and if we miss it, that sucks. Even if the idea was right, you know, as an investor, you can do it again. I don't think that the market time, well, I mean, I guess I don't really know what the market timing is, right? It feels right, because I think we're at an inflection point right now with tablets where they're accelerating in their growth, yet most people don't really look at them as something separate from smartphones. So in like 3 years from now, I think it will be obvious that tablet use cases are different than smartphones, but we're not quite there yet. In terms of like demographics of users that have tablets, I'm not sure what research you've seen or if it's just anecdotal, but I've seen lots of people who are kids, like in our country, in our like circles, who get tablets and they spend their time on the tablets instead of the house PC. So that's one audience, like preteens who will be growing into teenagers and they will be playing on these devices. I don't know. I can't say that I've specifically seen that older people play more than younger people games on tablets.
I have a question. So is one of the reasons, or this is just like a hypothesis,
Yeah.
could it be that the sort of people that like to play 40 hours of games at a time or in a short period of time don't like sacrificing efficiency and accuracy, which is what you do when you're playing on a tablet, as opposed to a mouse and keyboard? Because I know I played games with gestures like Black and White a long time ago where you draw little spells
Yeah.
and you cast a fireball, and
Yep.
it's really cool at first, and you're like, I just want to cast the fireball. I
Right.
don't want to draw a little circle anymore.
Right.
And so if I'm doing this for 40 hours at a time, isn't there this concern that I don't want to be dragging this little circle toward the guy every time where there's some degree of inaccuracy? Like, I'd rather just click on them and shoot them?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely is. So the way that we designed the game is that you're not constantly drawing circles and doing gestures just for the sake of being a gimmick, right? What we've done, the majority of the innovation in the controls is actually just in how you move around and tap on targets. It's mostly actually tapping based, but we have special moves where you do gestures. So if you're watching someone play, every, let's say, 15 seconds, they'll make a small gesture and it'll be really quick. And then the rest of the time you're tapping around and you're picking targets and stuff. So I don't think that you're going to have the black and white issue, which I experienced myself many years ago. But I think that perhaps what you're getting at is when we've shown the game off to people, or when we talk about this idea to gamers, oftentimes the immediate reaction is, MOBA on a tablet? This is crazy. Like, I have my mouse and my 104 keys, and I'm all about accuracy and precision, and this is what I want. But when we show people the game and they play it, they're like, oh, it actually does work. And now I can see myself playing this in places where I wouldn't play it before because I don't have a PC. And people who play MOBAs kind of look at it as like their casual MOBA that they would play over here. And I think that's a fantastic place for us to start with that customer segment. And then the preteens, and then eventually when tablets penetrate third world countries, I think the growth trajectory of our customer base will change significantly over time as tablets penetrate further.
Judges, any of you guys have any more questions?
I think the idea of focusing on tablets is a very good one. I think too many people talk about mobile and include smartphones and tablets and don't separate the two. And I think we see far more people, both in games and non-games, targeting smartphones. And so to me, there's I think a big opportunity on tablets.
Cool. Me too.
Congratulations.
So we're out of time, but that was Fates Forever. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very cool.